I never thought my 38th wedding anniversary would end with my entire family looking at me like I was a criminal. But that's what happens when your daughter projects your secret $5 million bank account on the TV during dessert. For decades, I'd been hiding money, dollar by dollar, year after year, while my wife Lorraine clipped coupons and worried about bills. I thought I was being smart, protective, cautious. But the look in Lorraine's eyes that night wasn't just anger or betrayal. It was fear. "If this came out," she whispered, "then everything will come out." Those words changed everything, because while I'd been hiding money, she'd been hiding something far worse. A secret that would shatter our family forever. A secret involving a mysterious son, a suspicious fire, and a decades-long conspiracy that not even the devil himself would forgive. If you want to know why I really hid that money, and what my wife was hiding from me all those years, follow our channel now. Hit that like button and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Trust me, what comes next will leave you speechless. I've always been a quiet man, not the type who makes a scene or draws attention. Most folks in Topeka just knew me as Harold, the warehouse manager who kept to himself. For nearly 5 decades, I punched the same time clock at Midwest Distribution, wearing the same type of faded blue shirt, driving the same route home. Nothing special about me, except for one thing that nobody knew. I was damn good at saving money, and I kept that hidden from everyone. My father taught me that lesson early. A man's money is his business alone, he'd say, counting dollar bills at our kitchen table after his factory shifts. Those words stuck with me like sap on skin. Looking back now, I wonder if things would have been different if I'd just been honest from the start. If I'd told Lorraine about those first few thousand I'd squirreled away. But secrets have a way of growing, don't they? Like weeds in a garden. One small lie becomes 2, then 10, then a whole life built around protecting what's hidden. That Sunday night started like any other anniversary dinner. Our kitchen smelled of cinnamon and butter from Lorraine's apple pie, the same recipe she'd made for our first anniversary back in '85. Our daughter Rebecca was there with her husband Ryan, both of them dressed up like this was some fancy occasion rather than dinner in our worn-out dining room. Their kids, Lily and Jason, were fighting over who got to sit next to Grandpa, me. That always made me feel special, being fought over like that. 38 years, Lorraine announced, bringing out the pie with those cheap number candles stuck in it. "Can you believe it, Harold?" I smiled and nodded, but inside my stomach was churning. 38 years of marriage, 35 years of secrets. "Speech," Ryan called out, lifting his glass of sparkling cider. He always did have a way of making things uncomfortable. "Come on, tell us the secret to a long and happy marriage." I cleared my throat, feeling the weight of eyes on me. "Well, I suppose—" "Actually," Rebecca interrupted, her voice cutting through the moment like a knife. "I think I know Dad's secret." Something in her tone made the room go cold. I looked at my daughter, my only child, and saw something I'd never seen before. A hardness around her eyes, a tension in her jaw. "What are you talking about, honey?" Lorraine asked, still smiling, though I could see confusion creeping in around the edges. Rebecca didn't answer. Instead, she pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times, and suddenly our TV lit up. She'd connected her phone wirelessly, something I never understood how to do. "You want to explain this, Dad?" she said, her voice trembling. The screen showed a bank statement. My bank statement. Not the joint account I shared with Lorraine, but the other one. The one at First National that I'd opened 35 years ago with a different address. The one that now held $5,219,347.62s. $5 million I'd saved over decades, dollar by dollar, bonus by bonus, investment by careful investment, my retirement, my security, my secret. The room went so quiet I could hear the ice shifting in the water glasses. Lorraine's face drained of color, her eyes wide with shock, then anger, then something else, something that looked strangely like recognition. "Harold?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "What is this?" I couldn't speak. My throat closed up like someone had their hands around it. 5 decades of careful planning, exposed in 10 seconds. "How did you find this?" I finally managed to ask Rebecca. "That doesn't matter," she snapped. "What matters is you've been hiding $5 million from your family. From Mom." Ryan had pulled out his phone and was recording everything. The bastard was actually recording this moment, like it was some reality TV show drama. My grandson started crying, confused by the tension. I was saving, I said weakly. For retirement. For all of us. In a secret account? Lorraine's voice had found its strength now, rising with each word. With only your name on it? For 38 years you've let me pinch pennies, clip coupons, worry about doctor bills? While you had millions hidden away? She stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the linoleum floor. You promised me, she hissed, her face now inches from mine. You promised. That's when I saw it, that look in her eyes. Not just anger or betrayal, fear. Like she knew something more, something worse. What did I promise, Lorraine? I asked quietly. She just shook her head, backing away from me. If this came out, and then everything will come out. The words hung in the air like smoke. Rebecca looked between us, confused. What does that mean, Mom? She asked. What else is there? But Lorraine was already grabbing her purse, her hands shaking so badly she dropped her car keys twice. Mom, Rebecca called after her. Where are you going? Ask your father, she spat, not looking back. Ask him about the money. Ask him where it really came from. The front door slammed, leaving us all in stunned silence. Rebecca turned to me, her eyes full of questions. Ryan kept filming, the red light on his phone blinking like a warning signal. But all I could think about was what Lorraine had said. If this came out, then everything will come out. Because the money? That was just the surface. What Lorraine had been hiding all these years was something the devil himself wouldn't forgive. And somehow she thought I knew. After Rebecca's bombshell, the living room felt like a courthouse where I was both defendant and witness. Lorraine stared at me with eyes that could have frozen hell itself. Her hands trembled as she pointed at the TV screen still displaying my account balance. $5 million? She whispered, her voice rising with each word. $5 million hidden from me? From your own blood? The pie sat forgotten on the table, the 38 candles now just waxy reminders of what should have been a celebration. I couldn't find words. How do you explain 35 years of secret financial decisions in one moment? Dad, how could you? Rebecca's voice cracked. She stood beside her mother, a united front against me. We struggled when I was in college. Mom picked up extra shifts at the hospital. And you had this? Ryan hadn't stopped recording. His phone was trained on my face, capturing every flicker of emotion, every bead of sweat forming on my forehead. My grandchildren huddled in the corner of the dining room, wide-eyed and confused. It's not what you think, I finally managed. I've been saving since before we were married. It was just a little at first, and then you decided your wife didn't deserve to know? Lorraine cut in. Her face had transformed from shock to something darker. 38 years, Harold. 38 years of, we can't afford that, and maybe next year, and let's be practical. Was any of it real? Or was it all just some sick game to you? I reached for her hand across the table, but she pulled away like my touch might burn her. Lorraine, please. I was protecting us, protecting our future. From what? She snapped. From me? From your daughter? Who exactly needed protection from your family knowing you weren't just scraping by? But there was something else in her reaction. Something that didn't fit. The way she kept repeating, you promised, like a strange mantra. I'd never promised her anything about secret accounts. We'd never even discussed the possibility. Rebecca moved toward her mother, putting an arm around her shoulders. Mom, did you know about this? Lorraine's eyes darted to Rebecca, then back to me. For a split second, I saw panic there. No, she said quickly. Too quickly. Of course not. Ryan finally lowered his phone. Mr. Willis, where did all this money come from? You worked at a warehouse. The math doesn't add up. A fair question. One I'd prepared an answer for years ago, just in case. Investments. Small ones at first. I got lucky with some tech stocks in the 90s. Then real estate before the 2008 crash. I reinvested everything, never touched a penny. Why? Rebecca's question hung in the air. Simple but impossible to answer truthfully. Because I never fully trusted your mother. Because something about her story never added up. Because sometimes late at night I'd catch her on the phone speaking in whispers. Instead, I said, I wanted security. For all of us. Security doesn't require secrecy. Lorraine hissed. She grabbed her purse from the back of her chair. Not from family. Where are you going? I asked, standing up too quickly, knocking my water glass over. It shattered on the floor, water and glass spreading like the mess of my life. I can't be here right now. She was already moving toward the door. I need to think. Mom, wait. Rebecca started. No. Lorraine turned back, her face a mask of controlled fury. If this came to light, then everything will come to light. The way she said it sent a chill through me. Not as a question, but as a threat. What does that mean? I asked, my voice barely audible. She just stared at me, a strange mix of defiance and fear in her eyes. Then she was gone, the door slamming behind her with such force that the framed wedding photo on the wall fell and cracked. That night she didn't come home. I sat in our bedroom, staring at her side of the bed, empty for the first time in decades. Rebecca had taken the kids home after making me promise to fix this somehow. Ryan had given me a look that said he wasn't sure whose side to take. I couldn't sleep. Her words kept echoing in my head. If this came to light, then everything will come to light. What did she mean? What else was there? The next morning, checking the mail became a new ritual of dread. 3 days after Lorraine left, I found an unmarked envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with typed words. Ask her about Houston. Houston? We'd never lived in Houston. Never even visited as far as I could remember. But when I checked our phone bills, something I'd never bothered with before, I found monthly calls to a Houston number going back years. Always short. Always on Tuesdays when I worked late. In our bedroom, I found Lorraine's private drawer unlocked for the first time in our marriage. Inside was a locked folder I'd never seen before, and a key I couldn't find. My wife of 38 years was a stranger to me, and as I stared at our wedding photo, her young face smiling up at mine, full of promises, I realized that perhaps she always had been, because whatever secret she was keeping, it was big enough to make her run when mine was exposed, big enough to make her afraid. And after nearly 4 decades of marriage, I was only now beginning to understand that my hidden bank account might have been the smallest secret in our house. A week passed, and Lorraine still hadn't come home. I'd called her sister in Lincoln, her friends from church, even the hospital where she'd worked part-time in medical billing before retiring. Nobody had seen her, or if they had, they weren't telling me. The house felt cavernous without her, all creaking floors and echoing rooms. I'd never realized how much noise she made, just existing. The soft pad of her slippers across the kitchen tiles, the way she hummed old Beatles songs under her breath while folding laundry, the gentle clatter of her jewelry as she removed it each night. All those little sounds added up to a life, and now they were gone. I was sitting in my recliner, staring at nothing, when the doorbell rang. I shuffled to answer it, hoping foolishly it might be Lorraine. Instead, I found Rebecca standing on the porch, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. She'd been crying. "Dad," she said, her voice hoarse, "we need to talk." I ushered her inside. The house was a mess, dishes piled in the sink, newspapers scattered across the coffee table. I hadn't had the energy to clean, or maybe I was punishing myself. "Have you heard from your mother?" I asked, clearing a spot for her on the couch. Rebecca shook her head, then reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. "I found this," she said, handing it to me with trembling fingers. The photo was old, the edges worn and softened with time. It showed Lorraine, much younger, maybe 30, standing between 2 men outside what looked like a cabin. One of them had his arm around her waist. "Do you recognize them?" Rebecca asked. I squinted at the image, my heart thumping painfully in my chest. One of the men was clearly Max Donovan, my former colleague from the warehouse. We'd worked together for 20 years before he died of a heart attack in 2010. Max had been to our house for dinner countless times. He'd been at Rebecca's high school graduation. I'd considered him a friend. But in this photo, the way he was looking at Lorraine, it wasn't how a friend looks at his buddy's wife. The other man I didn't recognize. Tall, thin, with sharp features and dark-rimmed glasses. He stood slightly apart from Max and Lorraine, his expression unreadable. "Where did you find this?" I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. "I was looking through Mom's things," Rebecca admitted, trying to find some clue about where she might have gone. "It was hidden in an old cookbook in the kitchen. There's something written on the back." I turned the photograph over. Written in faded blue ink were the words, "For those who know too much, June 1992. What does that mean? Rebecca's voice was small, childlike. I shook my head slowly. "I don't know. But Max," I tapped his face in the photo. "Max and I worked together. He was supposedly my friend." "Supposedly?" I sighed, sinking into my chair. "The way he's looking at your mother in this picture. I never saw him look at her that way when I was around." Rebecca took the photo back, studying it carefully. June 1992. That's when I was at summer camp, isn't it? The one in Colorado? I nodded. Your mother said she was staying with her sister that week. I was working double shifts. A heavy silence fell between us. The implications hung in the air, unspoken but unmistakable. Dad, Rebecca said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you think Mom and Max were… I don't know. I cut her off, not wanting to hear the words. And I don't want to jump to conclusions based on one photograph. But even as I said it, puzzle pieces were clicking into place. Max's overfamiliarity with our home. The way he and Lorraine sometimes shared private jokes I wasn't part of. The time I'd come home early from work and found them in deep conversation at the kitchen table, both falling silent when I walked in. There's something else, Rebecca said, interrupting my thoughts. She reached into her purse again and pulled out a small envelope. This was left at my house yesterday. No return address. I took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were photocopies of airline ticket stubs. 6 of them, spanning from 1997 to 2012. All in Lorraine's name. All to New Orleans. All in March. I never knew your mother took trips to New Orleans, I said, my voice hollow. Neither did I. Rebecca leaned forward, her expression a mix of confusion and determination. Dad, what's going on? First your secret account. Now these trips Mom never mentioned, and this weird photo with Max. It's like we don't even know who our parents are. The doorbell rang again, startling us both. Rebecca went to answer it while I sat frozen, staring at the evidence of my wife's secret life spread out before me. Dad, Rebecca called from the entryway, her voice strange. There's no one here. But this was on the doorstep. She returned holding another unmarked envelope. This one was thicker, bulging with its contents. I opened it with dread pooling in my stomach. Inside were more photographs, dozens of them, all of Lorraine in New Orleans. Different years, judging by her changing hairstyles and clothes. In some, she was alone, standing outside restaurants or walking through the French Quarter. In others, she was with people I'd never seen before. But in several, the ones that made my blood run cold, she was with the same thin man from the cabin photo. And in one picture, dated March 2001, she was holding a child. A boy, maybe 8 years old. Dark hair, serious eyes that looked unsettlingly familiar. On the back of this photo, in Lorraine's neat handwriting, David's birthday. He looks more like his father every day. My head began to spin, the room tilting at odd angles around me. David. Who was David? Lorraine and I had only one child, Rebecca. Dad? Rebecca's voice seemed to come from very far away. Dad, who is David? I couldn't answer, couldn't form words through the roaring in my ears, because now I understood why I'd been saving all those years. Why some deep instinctual part of me had never fully trusted my marriage, my wife, our life together. If I was hiding money, what was Lorraine hiding? The answer, it seemed, was far worse than I could have imagined. That night, sleep evaded me like a thief in the shadows. I paced our bedroom, still calling it our bedroom despite Lorraine's absence, stopping occasionally to stare at her side of the bed. 38 years of marriage, thousands of nights lying beside her, thinking I knew the woman breathing softly next to me. How blind I'd been. The photographs were spread across the dresser where I'd left them, illuminated by the pale moonlight filtering through the curtains. David, a boy I'd never met. A child who, according to Lorraine's own handwriting, looked like his father. And that father wasn't me. Around 3 a.m. I found myself standing in the hallway outside the upstairs room Lorraine had claimed as her sewing space years ago. A room with a solid wooden door. A room that always remained locked. It's just a mess in there, she'd say whenever I'd ask about it. Just my sewing things and old family mementos, nothing interesting. I'd never questioned it, never demanded entry. It seemed such a small thing to let her have her private space. Now, staring at the tarnished brass padlock on the door, I wondered what other secrets that room held. The lock had always been there, as far back as I could remember. A master lock, nothing fancy. I'd never seen Lorraine open it. She always made sure I was downstairs or out of the house when she went in there. The key she kept on a chain around her neck or hidden somewhere I'd never discovered. I went to the garage and returned with a pair of bolt cutters. The lock gave way with a satisfying snap that echoed through the silent house. For a moment I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob. Did I really want to know what was inside? Wasn't ignorance what had allowed our marriage to survive this long? But I was tired of being blind. tired of living with secrets. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first, musty, like old paper and dust. Not the scent of fabric or thread you'd expect in a sewing room. I fumbled for the light switch and blinked as a single bare bulb illuminated the space. There was no sewing machine, no fabric, no crafting supplies of any kind. Instead, the room was filled with cardboard boxes, dozens of them, stacked against the walls, labeled in Lorraine's neat handwriting. David, school records, David medical, David photos. One entire wall was covered with a large cork bulletin board, plastered with faded photographs, postcards, and children's drawings, signed in a childish scrawl. Love, David. My legs gave way beneath me, and I sank to the floor, my back against the doorframe. Here was an entire life, meticulously documented and preserved. A life Lorraine had kept completely separate from our family, from me. With trembling hands, I opened the nearest box labeled David Birth. Inside was a small blue baby blanket yellowed with age, a hospital bracelet, a lock of dark hair in a tiny envelope, and at the bottom, a document that made my heart stop, a birth certificate. David Michael Randall, born June 15, 1993. Mother, Lorraine Susan Willis. Father, Maxwell James Donovan. 30 years ago, Rebecca had been 12. I'd been working 60-hour weeks trying to get promoted to senior manager, and apparently my wife had been giving birth to another man's child. I stared at the certificate until the letters blurred together, my mind racing to make sense of it all. How had she hidden a pregnancy? Where had she given birth? How had she kept a child secret for all these years? As I rifled through more boxes, the story began to emerge through fragments. Medical records from a hospital in Houston, school reports from a private academy in New Orleans, birthday cards addressed to my darling son. In one box labeled simply legal, I found something that chilled me to the bone, a copy of what appeared to be my will, leaving half of my estate to my son, David Randall Willis. Except I'd never written such a will. The signature at the bottom was a perfect forgery of my own. I sat in that room until dawn broke, piecing together the shattered fragments of what I'd thought was my life. The room told the story of a woman I'd never truly known, leading a double life with a precision that was both impressive and terrifying. When the first rays of sunlight streamed through the small window, I gathered the most damning evidence: the birth certificate, the forged will, and a handful of photographs, and placed them in a manila envelope. Then I called Rebecca. "I need you to come over," I said, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. "There's something you need to see." She arrived still in her pajamas, her hair hastily pulled back, eyes wide with concern. "Dad, what's wrong? You sound terrible." Without speaking, I led her upstairs to the open door of Lorraine's secret room. I watched as her expression shifted from confusion to shock to horror as she took in the shrine to a brother she'd never known existed. What is all this?" she whispered, picking up a school photograph of a teenage boy with dark eyes and a serious expression. "Your mother's other life," I said simply. "Her other child." Rebecca turned to me, her face pale. "With Max? Dad's friend Max?" I nodded, feeling suddenly very old and very tired. "According to the birth certificate, yes. But how? When? I don't understand." I handed her the envelope containing the documents I'd collected. "Neither do I. But I think your mother has been living two separate lives for decades. And I think she's been planning to take my money, the money in that secret account, and disappear with her other family." Rebecca sank to the floor amid the boxes, tears streaming down her face. "Why would she do this? Why keep it secret? Why not just leave you if she wanted to be with Max?" I had no answers, only more questions, each more painful than the last. As we sat there among the evidence of Lorraine's betrayal, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Ask about the fire in Houston 2011. Ask why David disappeared." The text message about Houston burned in my mind like a hot coal. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Rebecca had taken some of the documents home, promising to do some digging online. I spent hours in Lorraine's secret room, methodically going through every box, every folder, every scrap of paper that might tell me who David Randall really was. Around midnight, my phone rang. Rebecca's voice came through, tense and hushed. "Dad, I found something. About the fire in Houston." My heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" "It was at a place called Greenwood Rehabilitation School. There was a fire in 2011. A bad one. 3 students died. She paused, her breathing audible through the phone. One of them was named David Randall. The name hit me like a physical blow. I sank into my chair, gripping the phone tighter. Are you sure? There's an article from the Houston Chronicle. It's just a small piece, barely a paragraph. 3 students died in a fire at a rehabilitation school for troubled teens. David Randall, age 18. There's no photo, no details about family, just a name on a list of casualties. My throat constricted. David was dead? Had been dead for over a decade? What did that mean for all the secrets, all the lies? There's something else, Rebecca continued. I found the school's old address and called. I thought maybe they'd have records or something we could access. And? A woman answered. Not a school, just a private residence. But Dad, her voice faltered. She knew who David was. My knuckles turned white around the phone. What did she say? She said she's lived there since they demolished what was left of the school. Said she'd get strange visitors once a year. A woman who would stand at the edge of the property and leave flowers. She told me, that poor boy's mother came every year. She cried so much. She always said his father never even knew he existed. The words hung between us, heavy with implication. I thought about all the trips to New Orleans documented in Lorraine's boxes. But not just New Orleans, there were records of annual trips to Houston too. Always in June, David's birthday month. Rebecca, I said slowly, I need you to look up everything you can about that fire. News reports, investigations, anything. And I need to find out more about this school. What kind of troubled teens did they treat there? We hung up, and I returned to the boxes with renewed purpose. In one labeled David Medical, I found a thick folder of psychiatric evaluations and treatment plans. The language was clinical, detached. Patient exhibits signs of oppositional defiant disorder. Increasing incidence of violent outbursts. Recommendation for residential treatment following assault of classmate. Buried deeper in the box was a small, leather-bound journal. The handwriting inside was cramped and angry. A teenager's scrawl. David's journal from his time at Greenwood. I read until the sun came up, my heart breaking with each page. The boy's words were a window into a troubled soul, full of rage and confusion. He wrote about feeling abandoned, about hating his fake family in New Orleans, about resenting his mother's other life in Kansas. One entry from 2010 chilled me. Mom came to visit today. Brought me cookies like that makes up for everything. She talked about him again, her real husband, the one who doesn't know I exist. She says he has money, lots of it. Says when I get out of here, we'll take what's ours and start over somewhere new. Just the 3 of us. Her, me, and Dad. I told her I don't want his money. I want him to know. I want to see his face when he finds out the truth. As dawn broke, my phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. Checked the old phone records. Lorraine called Greenwood the night of the fire. With shaking hands, I dug through more boxes until I found one labeled Phone Records. Inside were neatly organized folders containing years of call logs. Evidence of Lorraine's meticulous record-keeping. I flipped to 2011 and found the date of the fire, June 12th. There it was. A call to a Houston number at 11:42 p.m. The call lasted 23 minutes. According to the news article Rebecca had found, the fire had started around midnight. My mind reeled with possibilities, each more horrific than the last. Had Lorraine somehow been involved in the fire? Had she known it was going to happen? Or had she simply received the terrible news of her son's death that night? I was still sitting there, surrounded by the paper trail of my wife's secret life when Rebecca arrived, her face drawn with exhaustion. I found more, she said, dropping a folder on the table. The fire investigation. It was ruled an accident. Faulty wiring. But there were rumors. Online forums where people claimed it was suspicious. The school had been cited for multiple safety violations. They were facing lawsuits from parents. I opened the folder with dread. Inside were printouts of news articles, blog posts, and forum discussions about the fire and its aftermath. One headline jumped out at me. Greenwood School Fire, Accident or Convenient Solution. The article detailed the school's troubled history, allegations of abuse, negligence, even reports of students being sedated against their will. Parents had been trying to shut it down for years. There's something else, Rebecca said quietly. She pulled out a photograph, a school picture of a teenage boy. Dark hair, solemn eyes, a face that looked unsettlingly like my own at that age. This is David, she said. I found it in an old yearbook database. I stared at the face of the son I'd never known I had, because in that moment, looking at those familiar eyes, my father's eyes, my grandfather's eyes, I knew with absolute certainty, David wasn't Max's son. He was mine. I couldn't stop looking at David's photograph. Those eyes, my father's eyes, stared back at me from a face I should have known but never had the chance to meet. The revelation hit me like a physical blow, leaving me breathless, my hands trembling as I held the image of my son. "Dad?" Rebecca's voice seemed to come from far away. "Are you okay?" I couldn't answer. How could I be okay? I'd just discovered I had a son I never knew existed, a son who had lived his entire life without me, who had died thinking I'd abandoned him, a son whose existence my wife had hidden from me for decades. "He has our eyes," I finally managed, my voice barely a whisper. The Willis eyes. Rebecca sat beside me, her own eyes, the same shade as mine, as David's, filling with tears. But Mom listed Max as the father. Why would she lie about that? I shook my head, unable to fathom the depth of Lorraine's deception. I don't know. To keep me from finding out? To give Max a claim on him? I just don't understand any of this. The next few days passed in a blur. Rebecca took time off work to help me sort through the boxes, trying to piece together the fractured puzzle of David's life. We created a timeline on the living room wall, index cards and sticky notes mapping out the secret history that had run parallel to our family life. June 1992, the photo of Lorraine with Max at the cabin. June 1993, David's birth in Houston. 1993, 2001, periodic trips to New Orleans, where Lorraine apparently maintained a second residence. 2001 to 2010, David's troubles begin. School reports show declining grades, disciplinary problems. 2010, David is sent to Greenwood Rehabilitation School. June 12, 2011, the fire. David's death at age 18. 2011 present, Lorraine's annual pilgrimages to Houston. But why keep visiting if he died in the fire? Rebecca wondered aloud, staring at our makeshift investigation board. And why keep all these records? The room was like a shrine. I had no answers, only an aching hole in my chest where my heart used to be. On the 5th day after our discovery, Rebecca arrived at the house with a look of grim determination on her face. "I went to Mom's bank," she said without preamble. "I told them I was worried about her mental state and needed to check if her finances were in order." She paused, setting her purse on the table with deliberate care. "They let me access her safe deposit box." My pulse quickened. "What did you find?" She pulled out a blue folder, her hands shaking slightly. "Documents, letters, plans." She spread them across the kitchen table, pointing to each one. "This is correspondence between Mom and some lawyer in Houston. They're discussing how to finalize a fake will, your fake will, that would leave half your estate to David." I picked up one of the letters, dated 2013, 2 years after David supposedly died in the fire. The lawyer wrote, "Regarding the matter of HW's estate, I advise caution. The document you've prepared appears authentic, but probate courts can be unpredictable. We need a stronger strategy to ensure the funds go where intended. The amendments we discussed, to include DR as a beneficiary, must be executed with proper witnesses." Another letter from Lorraine to the lawyer, sent just last year. "David is no longer with us, but he remains our security. Harold's money will go to him, and then to me as his mother. We just need to make it look legitimate. The account is substantial, more than either of us imagined, enough to disappear completely." Rebecca's voice cracked as she read the words aloud. "She was planning to steal your money using a dead son as the conduit." She looked up at me, her face ashen. Or at least a son she claimed was dead. I felt sick, dizzy with the implications. But why wait? Why stay married to me all these years if she was just going to take the money and run? Because she didn't know where the money was, Rebecca said quietly. "Look at this." She handed me another letter, this one from the lawyer to Lorraine, dated just 3 months ago. "Without access to the account information, we cannot proceed. You need to locate where H has hidden these assets. Bank name, account numbers, passwords, anything. Without that, even the most ironclad will won't help you access funds you can't find." The room seemed to tilt around me as the full picture came into focus. Lorraine had been searching for my hidden money for years, planning to steal it using a fake will, and a son she claimed was mine but also claimed was dead. It was a scheme so Byzantine, so coldly calculated that I could hardly believe the woman I'd slept beside for nearly 4 decades could have conceived it. "There's something else," Rebecca said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Something that doesn't make sense." She pulled out a receipt for a wire transfer, dated monthly for the past 10 years. Each payment was for $5,000, sent to a facility called Whispering Pines Care Center in Minnesota. "What is this place?" I asked. Rebecca shook her head. "I don't know, but look at the patient ID number on the transfers." I squinted at the small print. Patient, DR 061593, Dr. David Randall, born 06-1593. Our eyes met, the same terrible question reflected in both our gazes. "Dad," Rebecca said slowly, "what if David didn't die in that fire?" The question hung in the air between us, electric with possibility. I looked back at our timeline, at the careful notes detailing David's death, the newspaper article, the annual visits to Houston. "If he's alive," I said, my voice rough with emotion, "then where has he been for the last 12 years? And why would Lorraine pretend he was dead?" Before Rebecca could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from the unknown number that had been feeding us information. "David Randall Willis is registered at Whispering Pines under the name Dr. Willis. He didn't die in the fire. He escaped. And he knows everything." I stared at Rebecca, my mind racing to make sense of it all. "I need to go to Minnesota," I said. "I need to find my son." Rebecca nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We'll go together," she said. "It's time we met our brother." The flight to Minneapolis was turbulent, much like the storm of emotions raging inside me. Rebecca sat beside me, clutching a folder containing everything we'd gathered about David. His school records, medical files, the mysterious payments to Whispering Pines. Outside the small airplane window, America sprawled beneath us, thousands of lives playing out in miniature. How many of them, I wondered, were built on lies as elaborate as mine had been? I hadn't slept in days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw David's face, those familiar eyes staring back at me from a school photograph. My son, a young man I'd never met, never held, never taught to throw a baseball or ride a bike, a stranger with my blood running through his veins. "What are you going to say to him?" Rebecca asked, breaking the long silence between us. I shook my head, throat tight. "I don't know. What can you say to a child who's been lied to his entire life? Who was told his father didn't want him?" Rebecca placed her hand over mine. "The truth," she said simply. "That's all any of us want now." Before boarding the plane, we'd received another cryptic text from our anonymous informant. "Check the fire report. No body was ever identified as David's. Dental records didn't match." With the help of Rebecca's husband Ryan, who had connections in law enforcement, we'd obtained the complete investigation file on the Greenwood fire. The details were more disturbing than we could have imagined. The fire had indeed started around midnight, in a wing of the facility where the most troubled teens were housed. Initial reports listed 3 casualties, David among them. But the final coroner's report told a different story. While 3 bodies were recovered, only 2 were positively identified. The third, badly burned, was tentatively identified as David Randall, based solely on the room assignment and a partially melted ID bracelet found nearby. But there had been inconsistencies. The dental records didn't match those on file for David. The body was slightly shorter than David's last recorded height. Most tellingly, a security camera on a nearby building had captured grainy footage of someone matching David's description, running from the facility just as the fire broke out. The investigation had concluded that in the chaos of the fire and evacuation, records had been mixed up. The third victim was likely another student, misidentified in the confusion. David Randall was officially listed as missing, presumed deceased. But someone had known he wasn't dead. Someone had arranged for him to disappear to Whispering Pines under a slightly altered name. Someone had been paying $5,000 every month to keep him there. Lorraine. As our rental car wound through the Minnesota countryside toward the small town of Lakeville, I tried to prepare myself for what we might find. The website for Whispering Pines described it as a long-term care facility for patients with psychological and emotional disorders. What condition would David be in after 12 years there? What had Lorraine told him about me? About his life? The facility itself was surprisingly pleasant, a sprawling campus of low buildings surrounded by pine trees and well-kept gardens. It looked more like a college than a psychiatric hospital. A far cry from the institutional nightmare I'd been imagining. At the front desk, a young woman greeted us with a practiced smile. "Welcome to Whispering Pines. How can I help you today?" I cleared my throat, suddenly unsure how to proceed. "We're here to see a patient, Dr. Willis." Her smile faltered slightly. "Are you on his approved visitors list?" "I'm his father," I said, the words feeling strange on my tongue. "Harold Willis." She frowned, checking her computer. "I'm sorry, sir. According to our records, Dr. Willis doesn't have a father listed. Only his mother is authorized for visits." Rebecca stepped forward. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm his sister. We've only just found out he's alive. We've come all this way." The receptionist's expression softened with sympathy, but she shook her head. "I'm sorry. I truly am. But our rules are very strict about visitors. Patient privacy and security are our top priorities." I felt a wave of despair wash over me. So close, yet still separated from my son by rules and regulations, by Lorraine's careful planning. "Could you at least tell us if he's okay?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "Is he well? Does he know about us?" The young woman hesitated, glancing around as if to make sure no one was listening. "I really shouldn't say anything," she murmured. Then, leaning closer, "But he's not what you think. He's not mentally ill, if that's what you're worried about." Rebecca and I exchanged confused glances. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Why is he here then? I've already said too much." She straightened, her professional demeanor returning. "You should speak with Dr. Mercer. He's Mr. Willis's primary physician. His office is in the East Wing." We found Dr. Mercer in a sun-filled office, a tall man with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair. After explaining our situation, showing him the documentation we'd brought, the birth certificate, the school records, my driver's license confirming my identity, he finally agreed to speak with us. "Dr. has been with us for almost 12 years, he said, choosing his words carefully. "He was brought here by a woman claiming to be his mother, with papers indicating he'd suffered a traumatic brain injury in a fire and needed specialized care. But that wasn't true, was it?" Rebecca pressed. "Doctor?" Mercer sighed deeply. "No. Physically, Dr. was perfectly healthy when he arrived. Some minor burns and smoke inhalation, but nothing permanent. Psychologically," he paused. "He was angry, confused, told wild stories about being kidnapped, about his mother keeping him hidden from his real father." My heart clenched painfully in my chest. "They weren't wild stories," I said quietly. "They were true." Dr. Mercer nodded slowly. "We've suspected something wasn't right for years. The monthly payments in cash, the strict instructions that no one else was to visit, the fact that Dr. became more lucid, not less, during his time here." He met my gaze directly. "Mr. Willis, your son has been held here against his will for over a decade. I've been gathering evidence, building a case, but without proof of his true identity, without someone to claim him. I'm claiming him now," I said, my voice stronger than I'd expected. "I want to see my son." "Doctor." Mercer led us through a maze of corridors, each one bright and clean, more like a college dormitory than the psychiatric facility I had imagined. The walls were painted in soothing blues and greens, with landscape artwork hanging at regular intervals. Patients in casual clothing walked freely, some nodding politely as we passed. This wasn't a prison, at least not for most residents. "Dr. lives in our independent living wing now," Dr. Mercer explained as we walked. "He's made remarkable progress over the years. When he first arrived, he was angry, volatile, understandably so, given what you've told me. But he's found ways to channel that energy." "How?" Rebecca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I could tell she was as nervous as I was, perhaps more so. She was about to meet a brother she never knew existed. Art, primarily. He's become quite a talented painter, and he reads voraciously. History, philosophy, psychology. He's educated himself far beyond what his interrupted schooling would have provided. My chest tightened with a strange mixture of pride and grief. My son had built a life, had found ways to grow and learn, even within these gentle walls. But he'd done it all without me. We stopped outside a door marked simply DRW. Dr. Mercer knocked softly. "Just a minute," called a voice from within. A man's voice, deep and measured. Dr. Mercer turned to us. "I should warn you both. This will be a shock for him. He's believed for years that his father didn't know he existed, that his mother was keeping him hidden for reasons he couldn't understand. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Beside me, Rebecca squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt. The door opened and there he was, David Randall Willis, my son. He was tall, taller than me by a couple of inches, slim but strong-looking, with dark hair cut short and neat. And those eyes, my father's eyes, my eyes, Rebecca's eyes, looking back at me with cautious curiosity. For a moment, none of us spoke. We just stared at each other, three pieces of a puzzle finally coming together after 30 years. Dr. Mercer said gently. These people have come a long way to see you. This is Harold Willis and Rebecca Willis Carter. David's eyes widened, darting between us. His hand tightened on the doorframe until his knuckles turned white. That's not possible, he said, his voice barely audible. My father doesn't know I exist. My mother made sure of that. She lied, I said, finding my voice at last. She lied to all of us. I never knew about you until a week ago. David's face went through a rapid succession of emotions, disbelief, anger, hope, fear, before settling into a guarded neutrality. You'd better come in, he said finally, stepping back from the doorway. His room was larger than I'd expected, more like a small apartment. Bookshelves lined one wall, packed tight with volumes on every subject imaginable. Another wall was covered with paintings, landscapes, portraits, abstract works, all signed with the simple initials DRW. A desk in the corner held a computer and stacks of notebooks. It's not much, David said, gesturing awkwardly to a small sitting area, but it's been home for a long time. We sat, an uncomfortable triangle of strangers connected by blood and betrayal. David perched on the edge of his chair as if ready to flee at any moment. How did you find me? He asked, his voice carefully controlled. Rebecca and I exchanged glances. Where to begin? How to explain the cascade of revelations that had led us here? Your mother kept a room, I started, deciding simple truth was best. A locked room in our house that I was never allowed to enter. After she disappeared, I broke in. It was full of you, your whole life, documented in boxes and photographs. David's expression hardened. She kept trophies, he said bitterly, like I was some kind of souvenir from her other life. We found evidence that she'd been maintaining two separate lives for decades, Rebecca added gently. One with us in Kansas, and another in New Orleans, David finished for her, with me and Max. Except Max wasn't my real father, was he? He turned to me, his gaze piercing. She told me he was. My whole life she said Max was my father, that he'd died when I was young. It wasn't until I was a teenager that I found out the truth, that she was married to someone else, that she had another family. How did you discover that? I asked. David's laugh was harsh, without humor. I found letters, photos, evidence she'd carelessly left where I could find it. When I confronted her, she admitted everything. Said my real father, you, were wealthy but cold, that you'd never accept a child from outside your marriage, that we had to stay hidden or you'd destroy us both. The cruelty of the lie staggered me. All those years my son had believed I'd rejected him when I hadn't even known he existed. Then came the fire, David continued, his voice dropping. Greenwood was a nightmare, a place for unwanted kids, for problems to be hidden away. I wasn't mentally ill, I was angry. I'd started talking about finding you, about exposing her lies, so she sent me there to shut me up. He stood abruptly, moving to the window to stare out at the pine trees beyond. The night of the fire, I got a call. My mother warning me that I needed to disappear, that you had discovered my existence and were coming to deal with the problem. She had a plan, a new identity, a safe place. All I had to do was run during the chaos of the fire alarm. She started the fire? Rebecca gasped. David shook his head. I don't know, she never admitted that. But the timing was convenient. I ran because I was terrified. I believed her. I thought my father was coming to kill me to protect his perfect family. He turned back to face us, his expression raw with decades of pain. Instead, she brought me here, told the doctors I was delusional, traumatized from the fire, paid them enough that they didn't ask too many questions, and then she left me here, for 12 years. Why? I asked, the single word containing all my confusion, all my heartbreak. David's eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw a flash of something beyond anger in them, a desperate need to understand. That's what I've been trying to figure out for 12 years, he said. Why create this elaborate fiction? Why keep me hidden? Why tell me my father didn't want me when she was the one keeping us apart? I thought about the forged will, the plans we'd discovered. Money, I said heavily. It was always about money. She knew I had it hidden away. She needed you as her claim to it when I died. And she needed me out of the way but still alive, David finished, the pieces clicking into place. A convenient heir who couldn't interfere with her plans. He sank back into his chair, running his hands through his hair in a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. It was the same thing I did when overwhelmed. All these years, he murmured, I thought you were the monster in this story. I moved from my chair then, kneeling in front of my son. Hesitantly, I reached for his hand, half expecting him to pull away. He didn't. David, I said, the name still new on my tongue. I would have moved heaven and earth to find you if I'd known. I would have been there for every birthday, every school play, every graduation. I've missed 30 years of your life, and I will spend whatever time I have left making up for that, if you'll let me. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then slowly, he raised his eyes to mine. I'd like that, he said simply. And in that moment, in a small room in a Minnesota care facility, something broken began to heal. Looking back on my life now, I realize that secrets are like cancer. They grow in the dark, feeding on silence and fear until they consume everything. For 38 years, I thought hiding my money was protecting my family, when in reality, it was just another link in a chain of deception that nearly destroyed us all. What would you have done in my place? Would you have trusted your instincts when something felt wrong in your marriage? Or would you have pushed those doubts aside like I did for decades? The greatest irony is that my secret account, the very thing that tore our family apart, ultimately reunited me with the son I never knew I had. Sometimes life's most painful revelations become our most precious gifts. Lorraine may have disappeared from our lives, but her web of lies inadvertently gave me something I never expected. A complete family, built on truth instead of deception. I lost a wife, but gained a son. And for the first time in my life, I understand what real wealth looks like. It's not the millions in my bank account, but the genuine connections with the people who share my blood and my truth. If this story touched your heart, or made you think about the secrets in your own life, please support our channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, it's never too late to break the silence, to reach for the truth, and to rebuild what was broken. The hardest conversations often lead to the most beautiful beginnings.